The candles were alight. Meredith Bailey stepped within the circle arranged in the center of her room. Her shadow bulged and contracted on the wall as she placed herself cross-legged on the floor and began to examine the object clasped in one of her hands, a brown baseball cap. The hat belonged to her father, who had been deceased for 10 years. She turned the hat around in her hands, rubbed her finger across the ribbed surface of the visor. The hat was critical for the commencement of the ritual, a link to her most cherished and vivid memories of her father. The tan fabric on the edge of the visor had become worn and torn. The back panels of the crown had become flaccid over years of much use, easily collapsing in when she turned the cap end over end. Meredith closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She calmed her senses, focused her mind, and began to visualize as clearly as possible a key moment she saw her father wearing the tan hat. He wore it most of the time, doing yard work, washing the '67 Camaro he loved so much, shopping in the grocery store, and whenever he left to work. All these memories quickly flashed in her mind, until one of her most pleasant memories captured her attention: fishing with her father. Every summer, her father enjoyed backpacking into the White Mountain region of Wyoming. He would camp a couple nights and enjoy fishing at either Seneca Lake or Island Lake. When Meredith got to about 8 years of age, she joined her father on this backpacking trip, and it became one of her most cherished memories. Piece by piece, the memory materialized in her mind's eye as she gripped the hat. First, she envisaged her father's favorite shirt, a celebration for his love of fishing. The shirt was a dark brown color. On the front was an inscription in white letters which read, "I'm in my happy place, gone fishin'." Below the inscription was a cartoonish image of a man settled back comfortably by a riverbank, fishing pole in hand, a peaceful smile on his face. Yes, that shirt said it all for Meredith. That was the place her father was most happy. More of her father emerged, his finely trimmed mustache, his blue eyes, which sometimes could be very subdued and thoughtful, other times twinkling with adventurous humor. All these elements converged together, recreating the moment of their fishing trip. He helped her reel it in, cheering her on, at moments tugging the pole along with her. She remembered that beautiful fish, flipping about wildly out of the water, sun glinting on its greenish-brown surface. She remembered her father hooting and hollering in celebration at her first catch, and then he showed her how to disconnect it from the hook. Then she was sitting around a campfire late at night, eating the fish they had caught, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Dad," Meredith whispered. She could see him, feel him, smell him. The moment became so real in her imagination that she could even smell the smoke of the fire and feel the heat of it. The fire alarm bleeped loudly, startling Meredith out of her reverie. "Oh, shoot! Shoot, shoot, shoot!" One of the candles had tipped over, and a portion of the carpet had started on fire. Meredith quickly grabbed one of her pillows from off the bed and began smothering the flame on the carpet. Once it was out, she quickly opened the nearby window so the smoke could drift out of the room. She used her pillow, fanning it around the fire detector in the ceiling. Knocking at the door. The door opened. That was the moment the fire alarm stopped. Meredith's roommate, Megan, stood in the doorway, observing the scene with a startled expression on her face. "Sorry," Meredith said, wincing at her embarrassment. "I had a stupid accident. Don't mind me, I'm just an idiot." Megan mouthed the word, "Okay," eyes wide with stunned confusion. Meanwhile, Meredith carried on extinguishing the rest of the candles. "Are you sure you're okay?" Megan said. A portion of her hair was pulled up in braids. It looked like Meredith's mishap had disrupted a hair experiment midway. "Yes, I'm fine." Meredith could feel the embarrassment burning like hot coals in her cheeks. "Okay," Megan said. A hint of a smile touched her lips as she turned and closed the door behind her. Frustration, embarrassment, disappointment all collapsed like an avalanche on Meredith at once. She squeezed her hands to fists and kicked over one of the candle sconces. Then a cold sting of guilt washed over the other emotions like a tidal wave. Maybe this was all getting out of hand. She had always told herself it was just curiosity, a simple interest, similar to how one might have an interest in collecting rocks or old antiques. But perhaps this was more than a simple satiation of curiosity. Perhaps she was becoming obsessed. Meredith walked over to the window once again and looked out at the parking lot below and the nearby street. She hung her head and sighed. Now she felt exhausted. All she wanted to do was climb into bed and forget it all. She had come across the YouTube videos late one night when she couldn't sleep. Life sometimes could be like the changing of weather or the changing of seasons. There were moments when she felt like spring and summer, when it was easy to be hopeful for the day ahead, eager to get to school, work, to meet up with friends. These were the good moments. Like her father's favorite shirt had stated, she was in her happy place. Then storms blew in, rain, hail, snow, and pounding wind. These were moments when Meredith had just taken a test and endured the agonizing wait for the results, or the moments when the results turned out terrible. These were moments when she failed with a responsibility at work and found herself written up by her manager. These were the moments when it felt like everyone hated her, when she would lay in bed at night, struggling to sleep, haunted by a vision of being chased by a mob through dark, lonely streets, a mob that cursed her and threw garbage at her. Such imaginings grew to such intensity that Meredith became very frightened, scared of what she might do to someone else or herself. Sometimes it broke her down to uncontrolled sobbing. It was moments like this when she wanted her dad, when she wished she could snuggle up to him and hear his words of comfort or encouragement. Her father was always the go-to during such occasions when she was feeling particularly vulnerable. Her mother tried to help with such matters, but she always reacted overly hypercritical and cold. Meredith missed her father during those lonely, stressful nights. YouTube became a comforting distraction for her during those nights when she couldn't sleep. Meredith was never much of a fan of YouTube before those lonely nights in her apartment bedroom. She had always thought it only consisted of silly cat videos or people making immense jackasses of themselves. But this was before she discovered Spirit Horizon 34. Taylor Donaldson and his wife Carrie Donaldson hosted the channel, and Meredith became deeply enthralled as they explored old hospitals, factories, ghost towns, and houses. In one particular episode, as the couple explored an old ghost town in Colorado, they witnessed something they thought to be paranormal. Doors and cupboards in one of the abandoned houses continually opened and closed as they wandered the empty rooms. Sometimes they thought they heard voices coming from upstairs, and at one point, Carrie was sure she felt something brush over her shoulder while she stood in a doorway, a sensation that caused her to shriek and jump. The channel changed direction after that. The couple became ghost hunters, even investing in ghost hunting equipment, like ghost boxes and EVP recorders. A small hope began to glow in Meredith as she watched Spirit Horizon 34 progress in their ghost hunting endeavors. She wanted them to make contact. She wanted proof of life beyond this mortal experience. She wanted to know her father was okay. One episode in particular moved Meredith on a much deeper level than the simple entertainment of mystery and suspense. It gripped her on a personal level. The title of the episode was called An Attempt to Talk to Dad. Meredith watched this episode over and over, so stirred up with emotion that she sometimes had to pause it and pace back and forth in her bedroom. Carrie Donaldson made an attempt to conjure the spirit of her deceased father, and according to the video, it seemed to work. The arrangement was simple. A circle of candles to produce an ambience conducive for the meditative process, along with an object that belonged to the deceased loved one. Mrs. Donaldson used an old shirt her father used to wear. She then closed her eyes and sought to imagine her father, visualizing him during moments when he wore his favorite shirt. Near the end of the episode, she said she could feel her father standing behind her. She said he had patted her gently on the head. She claimed she could smell him, and even heard his whispering voice call her by a nickname he often used when she was a kid, saying, "Take care, I love you, little stinker." Was it true? Had Carrie Donaldson conjured the spirit of her deceased father? Could Meredith do the same for her father? Meredith was so excited that she commented multiple times on the video, expressing how happy she was for Carrie, explaining how she too had lost her father at a young age. She also commented that she planned to carry out the same conjuration, and hoped that she too could hear her father's voice once again. Carrie Donaldson replied to her, "It's an enlightening experience. I hope you find closure. Well, I gave it my first try, and all I did was nearly burn down the apartment." She hadn't really proven anything, had she? Other than her imagination worked fine. Meredith wanted to believe. Not just wanted, she needed to believe. Otherwise, she felt the tragedy of her father's death would torment her forever. Rain. A continual downpour. Thunder booms from a distance and sounds like an immense boulder rolling through the clouds. Meredith stands on the edge of the sidewalk and stares at the house she called home for the first 10 years of her life. The house looks a little like a face with the 2 picture windows on the top floor, serving as eyes, and the porch below serving as the mouth. This is not a happy face. This is a face that looks deranged. The way the front screen door hangs aslant like a snarling, angry mouth. The top windows have ragged-looking holes pounded through them. As rain flows down the white panel siding, it looks a little like this face is weeping. An insane, contorted face, so overwhelmed it snarls angrily and weeps freely. A fitting expression for the confused emotions that existed in the home where she grew up. Thunder stomps the sky. She must go in. Something waits for her. No, not just waits. It calls to her, pleads to her to come, to hurry. An unseen force takes her, sweeps her off her feet, and like a carnival ride, Meredith floats along the path of cracked cement, up the weathered steps, and through the twisted maw of that front door. The front room is bare and ill-looking. It feels like entering a discarded skull from which the brain has been removed. No furniture, no decorations. The carpet, which once was beautifully white, is now stained with various fluids and smudges. Cracks seam through the walls, making ragged cross and star shapes. Cobwebs drape the corners of the walls. A large black spider clambers up one wall, and the scratching of rats can be heard behind another, the sound of the corpse being picked clean. The unseen force sweeps her off her feet again, and this time she floats down a short, dark hallway, and a door opens before her. A nauseating feeling overcomes her as she sees this room, an ill feeling so strong she wrestles with the unseen force, but to no avail. It's a feeling as though tiny bugs are crawling beneath her skin. The room overflows with garbage. Wads of paper, rotting food, broken bottles, discarded pieces of plastic, metal, and other fabrics pile the floor in untidy heaps. In the center of this pool of garbage is a car, at least the top hood of the cab, and the paint is peeling away and rusting over. Flies swarm the room, a thick dark cloud of them. She hears a muffled moaning, and the sound causes a jolt of terror to jab her belly like a hot knife. Where did it come from? She scans the fly-infested room, listening intently. She hears it again, a strangled wail, from somewhere near the car. She knows it's someone she loves, someone close to her. She can feel it in every fiber of her being. She jumps into the garbage and pushes and pulls her way through the rotting food and other junk to get to the place where she heard the well. She hears it again, right beneath her, beside the car, a strained, distressed cry. Frantically, she digs, shoveling her hands through plastic wrappers, splinters of wood, and shards of glass, until she uncovers a bruised and bleeding hand, the rest of the body still submerged under the garbage. She tries to take the hand, but can't. Her hands are gone. All that remains of her arms are bloodied stumps. She realizes she is breaking up. Her body crumbles to pieces. Meredith tries to scream, but her throat disintegrates, cutting her scream to silence. Tears drenched her pillow. Her body was sticky with sweat. "Dad," she cried. "Daddy, I'm trying." Meredith knew whose hand poked out from under the garbage heap. It was her father's. The room in the dream was the garage, the place where her father had ended himself. Meredith threw the blankets off her body. She hated the way it felt, like they were smothering her, like the heaps of garbage from her dream. She climbed out of bed and made her way out into the hall to the bathroom. All was quiet in the apartment at 4 a.m. She splashed water over her face from the sink and gazed at her tired reflection. Eyes reddened from crying. The skin under her eyes looked baggy and sagging. Her blonde hair was a tangled, matted mess. Old emotions returned to her mind like ghosts being awakened. She felt like a 9-year-old child again, the 9-year-old girl who happened to find her father's dead body in the garage. He looked like he had been sleeping, reclined back in the seat of his newly refurbished, dark blue '67 Camaro. The radio was on, volume low, playing an old Rolling Stones tune painted black. He laid completely still, eyes closed. She had been to the store with her mother picking up provisions for dinner that evening. The whole situation was just weird. The car was running. A hose was threaded through a slit in the window and connected into the tailpipe of the car. What kind of weird experiment was Daddy doing? Dad? Meredith knocked on the window. No response. Remember one morning, Meredith, when Daddy was washing the car on the front driveway? Remember how pleased he looked? Remember how he treated it like it was his most prized possession, washing it every week regardless of whether he drove it or not? Remember what he said to you one day after he finished putting on a coat of polish? Yes, Meredith remembered. "I think I could die and be happy now, Meredith," he had said, winking at her. It was a phrase people used all the time to express satisfaction. Meredith had thought nothing of it at the time. She had no idea over the course of months Daddy spent refurbishing the car. He was building his coffin. She remembered her mother bursting into the garage, wailing in tears, yelling at Meredith to get away from the car. So much after that moment became a blur, a whipping, twisting roller coaster, ambulance sirens and lights, police officers talking to her mother, weeping, moments of utter, pale shock and disbelief. How could any of this be happening? Why didn't they see any signs? Months after the funeral, Meredith was haunted by a dream of watching her mother weeping. Her mother's weeping became so intense that blood began to ooze from her eyes instead of tears. Fishing and classic cars, Daddy's two favorite things. But Daddy also had some darkness. There were dark corners in his life. Yes, there was darkness. Meredith pressed her back against the wall and slowly slid down into a sitting position. She remembered. The memory was so vivid, it was as though she was reliving it. Her heart pounded. Her father was bipolar. He had what her mother described as summer periods and winter periods. During the summer periods, her father became very active, like when he took her on fishing trips, or when he committed to refurbishing a classic '67 Camaro. Then he had winter periods, days on end when he would isolate himself in the bedroom, missing days of work. Sometimes it got so bad that he wouldn't even get up to go to the bathroom, and the stench of his feces and urine would contaminate the hallway. When Daddy isolated himself away, her mother half-jokingly said, "The bear is hibernating." She would then give Meredith a nervous, twitching smile. Then, when Daddy entered one of his manic phases, Mother described it as, "The bear has awakened from hibernation." At 9 years old, Meredith understood little about her father's condition. They had tried therapy and medications, but her father often neglected to take them, loathing much of the side effects or outright forgetting. Father had left a note. Her mother had found it on the counter and was reading it while Meredith had been discovering her father's corpse. The note read, "Dear family, I want you to know that I love you both. Please, oh please, know this is not your fault. I just can't take it anymore. I don't know what else to say. Sometimes there's just only one solution to a problem. I'm the problem. I'm broken. And I'm tired of the stress and confusion I put on both of you. Meredith, keep trying to make friends, even though it can be hard and scary sometimes. I know you'll be a good friend for someone. Goodbye." A monster in their lives. The monster won. Once again, Meredith sat in the center of her bedroom floor, gripping the tan baseball cap in her hand. She closed her eyes and remembered. An image of her father materialized in her mind's eye. His trimmed mustache, thoughtful blue eyes, and favorite fishing shirt. She could hear his fun-loving laughter. She could hear him praise his newly refurbished '67 Camaro as he finished putting on that coat of wax. Golly, Meredith, I could just die and be happy now. Then that wink, as if he clued her in on something, giving her a hint of his impending death. "Dad?" she whispered. "Are you there?" No answer. She could see him clearly in her mind's eye. She could smell him, the aftershave he often used. She could hear his laugh. "I'm sorry if I disappointed you. I just want to know you're okay. Can you tell me you're okay?" Something brushed her head, a gentle, quick touch. Meredith gasped, opened her eyes, and turned to see what might be there. Nothing, just her empty bed behind her. "Dad," she said, hoping she'd get a response. All she heard was the gentle hum of air blowing through the air conditioner vents. It could have been anything. Maybe a fly landed on her head briefly. Maybe it had been a phantom sensation, something merely imagined while she was in a deeply meditative state. And it could have been my dad, she thought, a sign from him to let me know he's okay. Multiple possibilities. Meredith decided to believe that it was her father. The ritual was working. She sees her father standing there before his grave. The sight of him overwhelms her. Tears of rejoicing. It's really him, after all these years. She hurries to him and he takes her in his arms. "I'm sorry," she says. "I know I disappointed you, Daddy. I tried to be better. I promise I'm better now." They look each other eye to eye. There's his face, renewed to perfection. He is dressed in a long robe. He caresses her cheek. "Come with me. I have a place to show you." She grips his hands, and both their bodies begin to morph and change, melting into the ground. Down they flow like water being absorbed into the ground. They flow by layers of rock and soil. All the layers of the earth rush past them as she flows with her father in this new form down into the earth. A sulfuric smell hits her, powerful and pungent. In this moment a vast, cavernous area opens up to them, and they fall like a drifting feather below. Other beings, also dressed in voluminous robes, dance about on the vast floor below, moving in a continuous circling waltz. Eerie music echoes throughout the cavern, a bizarre sound of pained shrieks, rumbling, with a backbeat of electric crackling. Their bodies reform into physical personages once they land upon the floor. Her father grips her tightly, pulling her towards him, extending one of her arms and gripping her waist with the other. "Dance with me," he commands. She complies, although it seems she has little to no choice about the matter. All strength has left her after their descent. She flails about in his grip, circling and sliding. She feels like a doll enslaved to his manipulation. All the other beings, deadpan in appearance, continue their circling pattern. The music rumbles and grinds overhead. "Where are we?" she asks. His face begins to change in that moment. The smile falls away and the skin under his eyes begins to sag and stretch. A feeling of cold, wrenching horror jolts Meredith as she watches her father's face melt away, revealing a skull beneath. His eyes sink into the skull, and only bottomless pits remain where his eyes had been. Meredith screams. She writhes and struggles, trying to break free, but this monster masquerading as her father grips her with arms like two boa constrictors. He pulls her in close and kisses her with the sharp, bony edges of its teeth, silencing her scream. She drinks of the endless darkness of his empty eye sockets. They all laugh. All of the dancing figures reveal their monstrous faces. Bony jaws crackle, unleashing a piercing, hideous noise. The moment she woke from the dream, the pain ignited within her, spreading like thorny vines throughout her body, constricting every muscle. Meredith was hardly able to move. She lay in bed most of that day, gazing at the ceiling. By late evening, the voices began to surface in her mind. They started out as indecipherable whispers, but gradually increased until they were like an angry swarm of bees in her head whose sting produced the venom of hatred and malevolence. The voices fought over one another, wailing and shrieking and gutturally growling, a feeling like claws ripping at her brain at moments when the wave of voices grew higher and higher to eventually collapse. The pain was so intense that at times it was paralyzing. All Meredith could do in those moments was gasp and moan until the wave of intense pain subsided somewhat. A strange urge came over her during moments when the pain subsided to a degree. Brawling voices in her head were the cause of it, like a wild crowd urging a fighter in the ring. Meredith's urge was to cut herself. She was sure that if she just dug a blade into her skin, she would give the voices what they wanted. She would pacify them. Later that night, once her roommates all went to bed, Meredith followed through with the urge that gnawed at her. She took a steak knife from the kitchen and locked herself in the bathroom. She gazed into the blade for a moment while kneeling before the edge of the bathtub. The distorted, faint reflection of her face gazed back. Then a wave of pain racked her, causing her to gasp and arch forward. Anything that could stop the pain would be worth it. The pain of the blade, though intense, would be short. She gripped the handle and aimed the tip of the blade upon her forearm. She took a breath, and then jabbed the blade into her flesh, twisting. Meredith shrieked. Her body trembled. Blood flowed down her arm and dripped into the tub. The voices began to drain from her mind, quieting to whispers, and eventually to silence. Meredith turned on the tub faucet and washed the blood down the drain. There was a knock at the door. "Are you okay?" It was Megan. "I'm going to be fine," Meredith said. Meredith awoke with the most bizarre feeling on her left forearm. The skin beneath the bandage produced a buzzing sensation, a wild vibration that jolted up and down her entire arm and partly into her chest. She sat up and leaned her back against the wall. Then she tucked the edges of her fingers beneath the wrapped bandage and unfurled it, wincing painfully as she did. Meredith crinkled her face with stunned confusion and disgust at the sight of the lump growing in place where she had cut herself the night before. The lump was black and swollen. The surface glinted from the sunlight shining through the parted window shades. Tiny hair-like nodules protruded from its surface. Meredith touched it, and the shock of vibration instantly jolted throughout her arm, causing her to jump and gasp in reaction. The surface of the lump had a rubbery texture. When she touched it, the lump almost felt like it was a living thing, struggling beneath the pressure of her fingers. This can't be normal. The worst she had ever experienced from a cut was a nasty infection, which she was able to repair through the use of antibiotics. Never had a cut seemed to heal overnight to be replaced by a large lump. She was on the verge of crying, the tears beginning to well in her eyes, but she fought them off. Do I need to go to a doctor? God, that's what everyone will tell me to do. I don't want this mess. I don't need it. Maybe this is a normal occurrence, but it just seems weird because it's the first time I've experienced it. Look, calm down, Meredith. Just wait it out for a few days and see if it gets better. If it's not better after like a week, then go to the doctor. Her thoughts scattered about in her mind. Heart pounding, tears threatening to flow. She chose to tough it out and got out of bed. She repeatedly told herself that matters would turn back to normal if she just stopped messing around. If she just let the matter of her father lay to rest. She began to wonder if Carrie Donaldson had had a similar experience. The video of her attempt to contact her father had been the last video posted on the channel. That was nearly a month ago. Meredith pulled up the channel on her YouTube app. Meredith glanced at the lump on her arm. A sick feeling of horror swelled inside her, nearly causing her to vomit. She clicked the video thumbnail, paused the video, and then typed a comment for Spirit Horizon 34. I tried the ritual. I think it worked. But I don't think I got the results that I was hoping for. What happened to you? She never got a reply from Spirit Horizon 34. Carrie Donaldson and her husband seemed to be gone mysteriously. Meredith called in sick at work and got the next few days off. She emailed all her professors. Much of the day was spent isolated in her bedroom. She sat on her bed with her back propped up against some pillows, regularly eyeing the lump growing on her arm. The hair-like knobs on the end of the black swollen lump seemed to have grown longer, and sometimes it seemed like they would move, swaying back and forth like the ends of strange worms stuck in a mound of mud. Meredith continually entangled her right hand in her hair, curling strands of it in her finger. After a few hours passed, she glanced over and realized she yanked out a large wad of her blonde hair. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Hesitantly, Meredith answered the phone. Hi, Mom. Despite the anxiety, she forced her voice to sound cheerful. It's been over a week since you called me. You know I like it when you call once per week. I'm sorry, Mom. I've just been busy, school, work, and all that. I've got a couple papers I'm writing. You shouldn't be too busy to call your mother. Are you having any fun at least? Oh, sure. Megan, Stacy, my roommates are always fun. Meredith shifted position on the bed and accidentally bumped the swelling on her arm. She winced at the spasm and bit her lip. What's that? Her mother asked, hearing her small gasp at the pain. Oh, nothing. I just have a bit of soreness in my arm. Strained it a little at work. Look, Mom, I've got to go. I need to go to class. Okay, I'm concerned about you. I don't like how you don't call me. I hope things are okay. Everything's fine. Okay. By the way, did you hear the news story about what happened in Colorado? No, what? Meredith closed her eyes and clenched her teeth, wanting so badly for the conversation to end. Someone got attacked by some creature that no one can identify. Multiple witnesses of the attack. I know you're not in Colorado, but it still made me worried. Just gave me a sick feeling, you know. Meredith felt like she had been slapped. Her stomach sank. Colorado. Violent attack. Unidentifiable monster. Carrie Donaldson was from Colorado. Had this been her fate? Meredith, are you there? Mom, I've got to go. Okay, call me soon. Love you. Love you. She ended the call and dropped her phone. It slipped off the bed and fell on the floor. She glanced at the lump on her arm. The black, ribbed nodules wriggled slightly. A news story formed in her imagination. 2 young college girls murdered in a violent attack. The perpetrators unidentified and on the loose. A voice spoke up in her mind. The voice sounded very much like her father's. "You're changing, Meredith. You're becoming your true potential. The caterpillar must struggle through the pain of the cocoon before it can become a beautiful butterfly." A feeling of peace suddenly came over her. The horror that overwhelmed her like a sickness was alleviated. "Will I be with you, Dad?" she said. The voice of her father spoke again. "It is your destiny." "Show me how. When they beseech you, give them your blood." Meredith got up from her bed and stripped away her clothing. She stood before the wide oval mirror in the corner of the room. The sight of her naked body centered in the mirror caused a feeling of disgust to rankle her. The sight of her body always made her think of a rodent. She loathed the sight of her milky pale skin, tiny thin waist, and nearly non-existent breasts. She was so thin that much of the lining of her rib cage was visible. Bones jutted out like blades under her skin and the corners of her elbows. She viewed the black lump on her arm and pressed her finger against it, causing the spasm to jolt throughout her. This time she savored the feeling. In a matter of pressure and time, she would become something beautiful. Later that night, Meredith watched YouTube videos of butterflies emerging from cocoons until she fell asleep. When they beseech you, give them your blood. Voices, pain, they were calling her once again. She awoke that morning with voices fighting over one another in her mind like radio stations cutting through static. The voices oozed with hatred and cruelty, coursing through her veins like a poison, enveloping her body. The misery produced by the voices was so intense it caused severe agony to her body. The lump on her forearm had grown to the size of a softball, and what had been tiny hair-like tendrils growing from the surface of the lump had now grown to the size of night crawlers. These worm-like appendages swayed back and forth like tarantula legs. Black scales jutted from the sides of each appendage like armor plating. Hope simmered inside her. This was her destiny, was it not? Transformation, renewal, a new form of beauty and power. Soon she would emerge from the cocoon a beautiful queen. She waited patiently, enduring the pain, until all her roommates left the apartment to attend to their classes and jobs. Once she was alone, Meredith got out of bed. Taking the knife she used last time, she locked herself in the bathroom. After stripping off her clothes, Meredith climbed into the bathtub and knelt in the center. She gazed into the blade of the knife once again. The distorted reflection looking back at her in the blade was like a dim memory of who she used to be, a pile of shed skin. A wave of inhuman voices surged in her mind, racking her body with pain. She doubled over, gritting her teeth and moaning through it. When the pain subsided, she gripped the knife resolutely and held the tip of the blade before her arm. "Feast," she said, "my blood." She jabbed the blade into her arm, shrieking and writhing as she did so. Blood flowed. The next morning, Meredith awoke to the feeling of intense spasms under her sleeping gown. She knew what it meant, and she greeted it with the optimism a child might feel toward growing pains. Meredith pulled the gown up, revealing her bare skin underneath. Black blotches swelled from her stomach and chest. The same hair-like nodules bulged from the surface of each swelling. The first lump that had started on her arm had now expanded far up her shoulder, and the tarantula-sized appendages had now grown to near octopus-like tentacles. Meredith could barely control her racing heart. She gasped for air, eyes wide and with awe and amazement. A knock at the door. Meredith covered her body with blankets. "Yes," she said. The door cracked open. Megan peeked inside. "Hi," Megan said. "Hi," Meredith said, forcing a smile, trying to look as casual as possible. A few of the tentacles pressed up under the blanket, rippling its surface. Meredith shifted her body in such a way to keep the tentacles down. Megan eyed the room with a conflicted expression of confusion. We just haven't seen you in a while. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." A strange new feeling came over Meredith in that moment, a fierce hunger. The voices spoke up in her mind again as well, but no longer did they inflict the agony as they did before. In her transformation, she was becoming more compatible with them. "I'm okay," Meredith said, rushing her words. "I've just been sick. Don't want any of you to be sick." "Okay. Well, when you get feeling better, please come out and spend some time with us." "Sure." Megan forced a tense, exaggerated smile, then ducked her head away and closed the door. A strong twinge of hunger gushed within Meredith. It was an intense feeling of lust. To be straightforward, she wanted to devour Megan. She wanted to use one of those tentacles growing under her arm to constrict Megan's neck. A human feeling of guilt sprang up within her, conflicting with the ferocious lust. Tears welled in her eyes. It was true. There was no turning back. Meredith held on to the last fragment of her humanity, struggling to let go. All of this horror began from a seemingly innocent matter. Despite the appearance of its innocence, she invited evil monstrosity into her life, and now she was becoming a monster herself. "Let it happen," the voice that resembled her father pressed. "Come to us." Other voices joined in, layers of voices, chanting for her to let go. Meredith ultimately released that final fragment of her humanity. It was swallowed up in the darkness. As the twisting appendages extended and enshrouded her body, tears coursed down her cheeks. A smile stretched across her lips. Mrs. Bailey turned on the news and prepared a cup of coffee. She was fully dressed in her work uniform, dress pants, cotton shirt with the Coley's Market logo displayed on the sleeve, an old-fashioned cursive C. Her apron lay draped over the chair beside her. Breakfast, news, then on to work. She worried about Meredith. Her motherly instincts sensed something was wrong. That's why she wanted to pay her daughter a visit, to find out what was really going on. A breaking news story announced on the TV. Something startling and tragic had occurred in the Happy Valley apartments near the university. The name of the apartment complex struck recognition in Mrs. Bailey. Her daughter rented a room in the Happy Valley apartments. The news anchor communicated with someone from a news helicopter who circled above the scene, filming what was happening. Police cars were on the scene. People were running away. The news anchor explained that the unidentifiable creature was on the loose in the city, wrecking cars in the nearby parking lot. 6 people were already dead. The news chopper cameras zoomed in on the creature. Mrs. Bailey's jaw dropped. Her eyes widened, and coffee began to make a steady drizzle to the floor without her realizing it. Displayed on the TV was what appeared to be an enormous mass of octopus, snarled together, a curtain of black, wriggling tentacles. The curtain parted as the camera steadily zoomed in, revealing a maw arranged with spiraling rows of serrated teeth. It felt like she was gazing into a staircase to hell. Mrs. Bailey reached for her phone on the counter, struggling at first to grip it. She couldn't take her eyes off what she saw on the TV. She needed to call Meredith right now and make sure she was safe. Once she managed to grip her phone, she saw a message from Meredith displayed on the screen. The message read, "Hi, Mom. I am finally becoming who I was meant to be."